Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Would the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Bacchus.
Present.
Brown May.
Here.
Carter.
Present.
Dickman.
Here.
Gallant.
Here.
Gurr.
Here.
Karras.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Wen. Urick. Chair Watts.
And I am here. Thank you. We do have a quorum. Please mark Assembly Member Wynn present when he arrives. He is presenting a bill, so if we're able to be expeditious, then we'll mark him absent excused. Welcome to today's meeting, everyone. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please be sure to silence your electronic devices. If you're testifying, please sign in at the table and provide a business card to our staff if you have one. Whenever providing testimony or public comment, please turn on the microphone before you speak, state and spell your name the first time, turn the microphone off when you're done, and every time you speak for the record, please start by introducing yourself with your name. For anyone wishing to provide testimony or public comment by phone today, it looks like we have a new phone number. It's 669-900-6833. And then, after you get in, enter the meeting ID 862-7151-1086 and then press pound. We will have public comment at the end of today's meeting. We will be limiting comment to 2 minutes per person. And if anyone has anything that they would like to provide in writing to the committee, you may do so up to 24 hours after the meeting. Anything in advance of the meeting must be submitted 24 hours in advance as a friendly reminder. With that, we have one item on our agenda today, which is a hearing on Assembly Bill 296. And as I am the presenter for that bill, I'm going to turn the gavel over to Vice Chair Carter.
Back in session. We will now hear Assembly Bill 296, which revises various provisions relating to motor vehicles. Chair Watts, please go ahead when you are ready, and don't forget to introduce yourself every time.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, Howard Watts representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County. It is my pleasure to present Assembly Bill 296 for your consideration today. There are essentially three portions to the bill. I am joined by Mr. Brian Reeder, who is going to talk about probably the longest and most complex section of the bill relating to digital license plates. Then I will talk about the other two sections of the bill, and after that, we are glad to take any questions that the committee may have. So with that, I'm going to pass things to Mr. Reeder to kick us off.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Brian Reeder for the record. The good news for you, it's the longest part of the bill, but I've never been accused of talking too much, so this should be pretty brief. Vice Chair, members of the committee, again, Brian Reeder speaking on behalf of Reviver. That's R-E-V-I-V-E-R. I will be addressing the part of the bill authorizing the use of digital license plates. That's in sections 2 through 5 of the bill. The majority of that is in section 2. Reviver is a company that is a leader in the digital license plate technology space and has already worked to authorize digital plates in 8 states. That's Colorado, Georgia, California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Michigan, and Illinois, and we're looking to make Nevada the 9th. So what is a digital license plate? It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's an electronic display device mounted to a vehicle capable of showing the plate number, registration, and other approved information such as emergency alerts and personalized messages. Per Section 2 of the bill, digital license plates would only be an option. We're not trying to force anyone to replace their metal plates. This is simply just an option it's authorizing. Section 2 also requires all legal information that law enforcement expects to see on a Nevada plate to be there at all times. Even when the vehicle is parked and turned off, it's still going to show your license plate number and your vehicle's current registration. And then also in Section 2, subsection 4, the DMV is authorized to approve banner messages to go on the plate. That could be Go Wolfpack or Go Rebels, Chairman Watts. And such messages would be required to be approved in advance by the DMV. Subsection 5, DMV is authorized also to allow for digital plates to carry the display of a specialty license plate. I know we have many in Nevada. Those are near and dear to us. So that's your STEM education, your Opportunity Village, your Lake Tahoe, all of those. We would have the capability to do that as long as the DMV authorizes us to do so. So why would a Nevada driver want a digital license plate? First and foremost is improved registration efficiency and compliance. It eliminates the need for registration stickers and enables real-time updates through a mobile app. And then also people just kind of like the modern look. They want to take advantage of the new technology, something new, and it's just kind of a cool look, to be honest. For fleet managers, in other states, they've enjoyed the fact that they can register their vehicles in a batch. It streamlines that process. Additionally, there are GPS tracking capabilities that can be turned on or off, and fleet managers have enjoyed that feature as well. And then other benefits include enhanced safety and security features. They can display Amber Alerts, stolen vehicle notifications, other emergency messages. Again, all this has to be approved by the DMV before it is deployed and out there on the road. So one question we get a lot is, are they secure? Digital plates are tamper-proof. If anyone tries to detach a plate, steal a plate, the owner is notified. The plate would also display that it has been detached actually on the plate itself, and I think there's a plate going around if I'm not wrong. And it would also cease all communications with the cloud, which makes it so whoever stole that plate can't change anything on the plate. It's going to continue to say that it is detached, and if law enforcement, anyone else sees that, they would know that this plate is in the wrong hands. As far as information that's actually stored, I mentioned cloud, and that might scare people. The only information stored on the plate or in the cloud is the information that's actually displayed on the plate. So the legal information, registration, the plate number, any banner notification, anything about a special license plate, no other personal information is stored anywhere at any time. It's completely unnecessary to do so. I guess we just understand this is a new concept. It's kind of exciting, and so we'd be happy to answer any questions. I kind of talked about the bill at a high level, but happy to discuss anything. Thank you.
Howard Watts for the record. Thank you, Mr. Reader. So he discussed these portions of the bill. I think one thing, we'll probably get it in questions as well, but I just want to make clear, this just provides the opportunity for folks to have this option. It would not replace traditional plates. There is nothing in this that would ever allow traditional plates to be replaced. And additionally, I also just want to highlight that this simply creates essentially the guardrails and framework for the Department of Motor Vehicles to evaluate this if they'd like. It does not actually even require the DMV to allow for digital plates. It simply opens it as a possibility to be considered and lays out the requirements for that. I'm going to jump around in the bill a little bit more. So the second item that is covered by this bill is in Section 6. In the 2019 session, we passed a mileage gathering pilot program in order to gather information on the miles being traveled by vehicles so that we could have a stronger understanding of the driving habits of folks across the state, and really particularly to inform conversations about highway funding in the future. In particular, we wanted to understand the miles being driven by electric vehicles. For a long time, you've had to provide your odometer reading in Clark and Washoe counties when you go and get a smog check. For the longest time, that information went to the check station. but there was no compilation of that information. And electric vehicles don't go to get their cars smogged. And so we wanted to make sure that we understood the driving habits of all the different vehicles, and that mileage data could inform modeling and other analysis of, what different funding mechanisms for electric vehicles in particular could look like. Well, the pilot program was scheduled to sunset in 2026. We're still having conversations about what some of those solutions might look like, and having a consistent stream of data to be able to make that and to do that modeling and look at those options is still needed. And so this would remove the sunset provision on this pilot program and continue that information gathering that, again, is occurring today. So this would just ensure that we continue to get that data so as we head into hopefully next session, where we can look at some policy solutions in this area. Now, jumping back to the beginning of the bill in section 1, this is actually really where the genesis for this bill started. It is the issue that I am personally most passionate about in this, and then just added in other things that I thought were good policy along the way. So, Section 1, subsection 5 of the bill is related to installment payments. And I can briefly describe the intent with the language, as well as some of the conversations that have been had. I've been interested in a long time in figuring out ways that we can reduce the financial burden for Nevadans. And one of the things that I've heard from constituents for a long time is the struggle of paying vehicle registration fees. As we all know, they can mount into the hundreds of dollars. If you're fortunate to have a nice new car, it can be over $1,000. And do all at once in order to maintain that registration. And it is a struggle for folks. And we know we're all annoyed by folks who don't have their cars registered to Nevada. We're all annoyed by folks that have expired registrations, and all the enforcement that causes to try and address that. And for a lot of people, it's simply because they cannot afford to pay. So some people, they don't. They either let go of their cars, they start trying to rely on public transit or other options. They drive unregistered and risk it and try and see if they can get to the point where they can scrape the money together. Or they go to whatever financing options are available now, including high interest payday loans, in order to try and cover these costs. The goal of this is to offer another option. In talking with the Department of Motor Vehicles, they raised some really good and substantial concerns about installment payments being managed entirely by the state. One was debt collection. Currently, they do not have to do debt collection because these fees are due up front. If there's installments, what would happen if somebody missed one of the payments? Another that was brought up is cancellation of registration. Again, currently, you pay for it all up front, you get that 12-month tag. So how would we navigate that? One thing that was definitely not of interest was issuing tags for shorter periods of time and having more people come visit the DMV to complete transactions. So the solution that we came up with was a partnership with a third party. I think all of us are familiar with the rise in buy now, pay later type arrangements. Affirm is one that I think many people are familiar with. PayPal has some, Klarna. There are many of these entities that now offer you the ability to, in a sense, finance, but really to break up your purchase into installment payments. Oftentimes, these arrangements are have no fees attached to them. That's because it's making those purchases more accessible, and so vendors, stores, are actually covering those fees and compensating those providers to offer those options because it's generating additional sales for them. So we want to do something similar for registration. Partner with that third party. They would provide the payment upfront to the DMV, eliminating the need for any potential debt collection or the cancellation of any registration. For as far as the department is concerned, things would continue on essentially business as usual. As a result of having this partnership, it would be clearly disclosed, including any additional fees beyond the normal registration fees that would have to be paid, and that this would be going through a third party. And somebody who is online on the DMV's platform could choose whether they want to go direct and pay all in once, or if they want to go work with this third party to get an installment payment plan. I think one of the things that has been brought up is what happens if somebody misses that payment. Again, that would fall under the traditional default and debt collection practices of that third party as essentially a lender. Nothing would fall onto the DMV. And the likely consequences that they would not offer installment payments to that individual again, which would lead them right back to where we're at today, which is that they would have to pay in full as their only option. So as a result, this would not give the DMV any new enforcement or consequence authority because, again, at the end of the day, they're still going to get the entire payment for a registration and issue that tag and then see folks when it's time for renewal. The language of this is really aimed at that. Chapter 675 is essentially kind of a catch-all chapter of Nevada revised statute for lending, and these buy now, pay later entities are currently regulated within this chapter, along with some other lenders. So that is why we have the reference to that. When we talk about electronic branch office, and essentially we're just saying online. We don't want to also overly complicate office visits because of this partnership. So essentially, you go online, and again, when you get to kind of checkout, you'll have two options: traditional or an installment payment option. And specifically, we are only doing this for registration fees. There are some other fees that are kind of all lumped together, but they're all due at the same time, and you can't register your car unless you pay them. So what we traditionally consider that registration fee, it would only be for those types of transactions. We're not looking at any other transactions at this time. So again, I think the net benefit of this is actually increasing revenue to the state from folks that currently cannot afford to pay their registration fees in one installment. I think it provides greater options and flexibility, and again, just lowers the sometimes significant financial burden that some of our constituents face under the current system. It doesn't privatize any of the aspects of the current state system that we offer, and again, I think strikes that balance of meeting needs of consumers and the needs of the department. I'll just close by saying that we're continuing to have conversations with the department, with potential vendors who are interested in this, as well as consumer advocates, and are working on putting some additional details into the bill. We do not have those all fleshed out yet, and I didn't want to push this off, this conversation, while we work on that, but I do want to let you know that those conversations are ongoing. A few things that we're looking at are providing clear guidance on what the maximum fees could be. Under Chapter 675, the maximum interest rate, which would include any fees as well, is 40%. So one way that you could think about that is if it was $100, which would be a really low registration payment in my experience, the maximum would be $40. And that could be, again, that could be something that you could look at as maybe quarterly payments with a $10 surcharge on top of it. There's different ways that could be arranged. But that would be the absolute maximum under statute currently. We're looking at, one, defining that these have to be a fee-based arrangement, not an interest rate-based financing mechanism, and then putting some clarity on what that maximum fee could be in statute. And then again, there's different ways to do it, so we might try and come up with a way that allows folks to offer it, whether it would be an kind of upfront setup cost, or if they wanted to tack that fee on to each installment, we'd let folks figure that out with the department. So we are working on some language to do that. There's also going to be some language that may need to be changed. There's additional conversations about what it would take to make sure that we can get as many vendors to submit bids to offer these services. The more competition that there is, the better deal that we're going to get for consumers. So that is additionally something that we're working on. But I just wanted to mention that we are working to hone in a couple of those things. Finally, you will hear from the department. While this is not the fiscal committee, they will probably mention that they have either submitted or are working on a substantial fiscal note. I was hoping I was going to get the zero fiscal note, but that's not going to happen. One of the things that we are in conversation about is, as I think all the members are aware, the department's in the midst of a technological transformation. And so we do plan to adjust the effective date of this bill so that they would only have to build it into the new system moving forward, not both the current system and the new system, which I've heard will significantly reduce whatever that fiscal note would be. So just wanted to provide all of that information on where our discussions are at for the committee. I thank you for your time and consideration. We're glad to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chair Watts, and thank you, Mr. Reeder. Are there any questions from the members? Assemblymember Brown May.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Chair, for the presentation. Mr. Reeder, great to see you here. Love digital. I have a couple of questions, if the Vice Chair will indulge. When a plate is detached and the security is in force, right? So I've previously dropped a vehicle off to an auto body shop. My plate was lifted. It ended up 3 cities away. Nobody knew it until it was illegally parked and somebody had to tow it, right? So how do we know, where does this go when a digital plate is lifted off of a vehicle? What's the security mechanism, and then who monitors that data?
Brian Reeder for the record, Vice Chair, if I may respond directly to the member. Thank you for the question. In that case, if a plate has been detached, the owner would be notified immediately. Also, the company providing the plate, in this case, in our case, Reviver, would also be notified immediately. They would be able to contact the owner and say that, hey, your plate has been detached. There are current rules about a detached traditional metal license plate. In that case, I believe you would need to file a police report. You would need to contact the DMV and take the normal protocols to say my license plate has been stolen. If law enforcement is able to retrieve that plate, then the owner would get it back. Obviously, there'd be a way for them to get that back. If not, then Reviver or the company involved would have the option to provide a new plate to make it right with the owner, however that work. But there are current rules that exist that would protect that owner. And then a key feature of our technology is that they would be notified immediately.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair? Thank you. I appreciate that response, right? Knowing that I can just contact the police and we would go through regular procedures, I think is advantageous. I know that you talked a little bit about the DMV and their transformation efforts and we would love to see this bill take effect quickly for a lot of reasons, especially with regard to the payment plans, right, and affordability for registrations. I know that the DMV often deploys more quickly than they anticipated updates to the system. I'm just curious to know if you've gotten any feedback from the DMV with regard to what do they anticipate would be the reasonable deployment of a payment plan in Nevada.
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember Brown May. Howard Watts for the record. I think I will partially defer some of that to when the DMV comes up. However, you're right, and there's been a couple of different thoughts on this over time. Sometimes there's been a lot of interest in putting a hard date on this to try and encourage the department to get things done by a certain time. There's also been another way of making these requirements effective, essentially as soon as their technology is able to handle it, so that we also don't necessarily overshoot the estimate and we can get things online as quickly as possible. So those are a couple of options of how we try and address it in terms of the language. I share your desire to try and get this relief to consumers as quickly as possible. The one thing I will say, I really want to applaud the DMV. I reached out to them several months ago to start having conversations about this. They've put out requests for information. They have talked with vendors. They've engaged their own staff time, and I know that they're busy with many things. And I just want to commend them taking time to start working on this. So the one thing I can say is that separate from the technological transformation effort overall, I think that the department has already put in some legwork that leaves them well positioned to start putting things in motion. For example, if they need to adopt any regulations, going through whatever competitive bidding process would look like to solicit a vendor and begin setting those things up. I think the department is well positioned to, if this bill moves forward, to take on those tasks pretty quickly and be able to get that to marry up with the technology being able to handle it. And finally, I do think that to the maximum extent possible without getting into our state systems, I think given the large volume of registration transactions, that vendors would be willing to help provide as much support as possible as part of those contracts in building, for lack of better terms, a widget that could integrate quickly and effectively into the DMV system.
You may have one more, Chair.
Let's see if we got time on the back end. And Assemblymember Dickman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And thank you for the presentation. You've done, as you always do, an amazing job of anticipating questions and answering them in your presentation. But I have a what if. So if the digital plate were to go dark for whatever electrical reason, would the driver of the vehicle be subject to traffic stop and citation because their plate was not visible?
Brian Reeder for the record on behalf of Reviver. Assemblymember, that should not happen. The technology uses e-ink. So you may be thinking of like an iPad. If an iPad turns off, it's dark. If you smash an iPad, it kind of looks like an ink blot or something that's not useful. This is more like a Kindle. Whatever's on a Kindle, when a Kindle breaks, is going to display the last thing that's on there. So no matter what's going on with the plate, it's not going to go dark in the sense that the tag will not be there. That's just something that never should happen. Now, if it did, if there was a malfunction, theoretically, you're right. Someone would, you have to be displaying your car registration, but the technology is pretty dialed in that that's not an issue.
Thanks. Could I one more quick section? Thank you. So this one is about the extending the miles traveled study. And you did explain it a little bit, but I'm just wondering why 7 years was not enough to collect the data that we needed.
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember Dickman. Howard Watts for the record. It's a great question, and I think as you and I were both on the Finance Committee earlier today talking about some of the issues with funding for our highways, it's clear we have not addressed those problems fully. So because we have not adopted a solution, that again, a lot of that data collection was meant to help inform the solution. Unfortunately, we're not there yet, to just put it diplomatically. And the last thing that I would like to see happen is for us to get to a point where we're ready to look at a solution and then the data to back it up or inform it is not there. And so I wish that it were not the case. I wish that we had fixed some of the things that we had talked about since I started here in 2019. I know some of those conversations have been going on since before that even. But the unfortunate fact is that we have not. And so that's why we want to continue to gather that data so that we can hopefully inform that solution and get it done. And then at that point, we can look at, we can reevaluate these provisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Assemblymember Bacchus.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair, and thank you, Chair Watts and Mr. Reader, for your presentation. I like three-part bills, but kind of a couple comments. One, I'm a big fan of doing the kiosks monthly, where there would be a small fee, because I do worry about usury fees of any company coming in to try to do those monthly payments. The other thing is I think, Chair Watts, you have some negotiating power with the DMV because you're saving them money if you extend this deadline in all of the data they're tracking, because I'm assuming they're going to have to fix their software to take it out at some point. But all joking aside, I went back and looked at AB 483 from the 2019 session, and I was just curious, like, because I do believe, like, obviously things are changing. Cars are getting more fuel efficient. Electric vehicles, we're evolving and looking at the struggles we are having with our highway fund. Do you kind of know, like, I haven't looked at any of the reports. We're supposed to get reports, I guess, every 6 months, where we really are. Like, do you have any idea if, like, of any amount of revenue we may be losing, or some kind of proportionality between use of gasoline vehicles versus electric?
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblymember Backus. Howard Watts for the record. That's a great question. So one of the things that we can definitely do is follow up. Maybe it's the fact that I'm the chair, so I do get those reports. So, but glad to share them with the other members of the committee as well. I think they're really informative, and it just breaks out and highlights information in a way that I think is really accessible. So, and it includes, hybrid vehicles, plug-in hybrids, fully battery electric vehicles, and it includes the number of those vehicles that are registered. So if you wanted to consider adopting essentially kind of like flat fees based on vehicle type, it gives you can take that number and take what number you'd want to apply to it and start running some calculations on that. But then it also has the mileage. I think one of the things we've seen, for the longest time, I think we kind of operate on 12,000 miles per year average driven by a passenger vehicle. What we've seen is about 10,000 miles per year is driven by an electric vehicle. Again, part of that might be because of charging infrastructure for long distance trips, so they're used a little bit more in town, and that's reducing the annual average miles driven. But it's been a very interesting data point for us to have, and so things like that are help inform us and understand the total mileage that's being put on, the potential impact that that's having on our roadways, and then allows you to do, again, modeling of various scenarios of what highway funding solutions could look like.
Assemblymember Moore.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question has to do with the Section 1 around the third-party vendor. You mentioned that this would be modeled after the buy now, pay later, like Affirm, Klarna, I forgot the other one. But these buy now, pay later vendors tend to look at people's credit score. Is that something that if this is something the third-party vendor will be using?
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember Moore. Howard Watts for the record. I know that is something that's been a factor, and again, that's one of the reasons that we've been in conversations about putting some clear kind of guardrails in place. I know with a lot of these folks, if you meet certain requirements, you go into the no-fee installment plan. And then when some folks have less credit worthiness, for example, then they get offered basically short-term financing, 12 months at an interest rate. So that's, again, why we want to be really clear and give some guidance that we don't really want to go down the 12-month financing interest rate pathway on this. and we want to set some clear expectations and boundaries for what a fee structure could look like. I think it is possible that that these vendors could look at credit scores in making determinations. Again, I think part of that, the balance is, having a contract with the Department of Motor Vehicles to provide this as an option to a high volume of transactions, I think is something that I've already heard that there's some interest in. And so I think that allows kind of some balance and consideration in who they offer this to. But I do want to be, clear at the end of the day, it's an option that we want to provide additional access to, but it's not a guarantee. Again, if folks default on those payments, they're not going to be guaranteed the right to pursue an installment in payment again in the future. And that's just, we have to kind of balance all the different competing considerations with this. And so the goal of this is to put the option out there, but it is not a guarantee that everybody would be able to take advantage of it.
Is there any other questions? Assemblymember Urick.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and I'm going to confess I'm a bit of a technology geek, and so I was intrigued by this bill, and I hadn't heard of digital license plates before. And honestly, as a business owner, finding ways we can leverage technology to create efficiencies I love, and the idea of bringing that here in this way to increase government efficiencies is especially intriguing to me as a legislator. Vice Chair, if you don't mind, I have two questions, and the first one is, I'm almost embarrassed to ask this because I think you might have already done this or addressed it in your presentation, but if I wasn't already working a bill that was addressing this underlying issue on the question I want to ask is, I want to just clarify for the record, there will be no intention of establishing a specific vendor in our statutes, right? This is something that would be subject to a regular, ongoing RFP to ensure that the state is getting the maximum value, both for these third-party vendors and I know you're here, Mr. Reader, representing Reviver, that whoever this is would be subject to that ongoing RFP to make sure we're getting the best quality service for the best price. And then additionally with that, kind of 1.B before I get to my second question is, do we know how many vendors actually operate in this space? How many competitors to like a Reviver or these third-party loan lenders?
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember Urick. Howard Watts for the record. Great questions. I'll speak to the first piece. And again, I think you rightly point out that there's two sections where vendors would be able to kind of compete and get in the mix. One being installment payments, one being digital license plates. And you are correct. There is nothing in this bill that would preference any one vendor or provider over another. Those would be put out to bid. I know on the installment payment side, there's even been discussion around how that might look, if there might be the opportunity for multiple vendors to simultaneously offer products so that you could have ongoing competition. I think all this, we're having ongoing conversations about that. We want to do whatever is going to help drive competition and deliver the best overall options to consumers. And yes, no matter what those bids and awards would be, they would have a term and they would continually be reviewed to provide additional options. And so that overall kind of neutrality applies across both sections of the bill. And then as far as entities offering digital license plates, I'll turn that over to Mr. Reader.
Thank you for the question. Brian Reader for the record on behalf of Reviver. Reviver is aware of one other vendor in this space. There may be others, but we've seen one other so far.
Thanks for the indulgence, Vice Chair. So my second question comes along of, again, leveraging technology also comes with some liabilities. And I heard you talk about specifically some of the data that is being collected and its limitations that might be subject to be hacking or something otherwise out there on the web. Deeper than that, my question is if we can kind of help establish this here as well. Like, for example, my family, we use Life 360, and much to my kids' chagrin, I can tell when they've sped, they've braked too hard, and I get like, dangerous drive from one of your kids. Can you just clarify for us, you had mentioned GPS, which of course is something I imagine some of these features might be available. What type of data is actually being collected through this type of system, specifically the digital license plate? And then also, if you can clarify, who owns that data? And is there any risk that this could be either mined and sold, or even perhaps potentially even, like, is it something that could be subpoenaed by law enforcement for use in a fatal traffic investigation? So if you could just clarify that for me, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, Brian Reeder for the record. I may have to follow up with part of that. Who owns this data? I'll need to clarify with the client who actually would own that. As far as what data is stored on the plate, stored in the cloud, that is just the information that you see unless you turn on the GPS feature. Then, of course, there is GPS data that is also on the plate in the cloud. For the rest of your question, I'm going to have to follow up and get those details, though.
Thanks, Vice Chair. So is it the, maybe I misunderstood, is it the user that gets to choose as to whether or not they want that on or off at any given time?
Brian Reeder for the record. On behalf of Reviver, yes, sir.
Assemblymember Brown May.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I just have one follow-up. I'm curious to know, while you're working on digital registrations, and I love that we're supporting this, has there been any conversation with regard to digital driver's license?
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember Brown May. Howard Watts for the record. It's a great question. I know that it's a passion of yours. I have not engaged in those conversations. I am supportive of continuing modernization and offering additional options. So if that's something that gets worked out and wants to get tossed in here, I know Assemblymember Backus likes 3-part bills, so I don't know if a 4-part will be acceptable, but you know, certainly open to it. Again, I think it would have to follow the same principles, completely optional, and we have to, you know, work with any interested stakeholders. But again, I think the more that we can do to continue to modernize, and again, just offer folks options. You know, that's the bulk of what this bill is about, is offering people options, whether it's options in how you want your license plate, options in how you want to pay your registration. And yeah, if we have the opportunity to throw in something to help provide options for how you have your license, that would be great. I know my wallet app on my phone is becoming more and more convenient for all kinds of different things. And so if you could end up having your license in there, that would be great.
Thank you. Assemblymember Moore.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have another question relating to the installment piece in Section 1. Are you aware if there's any other states that offer this option?
That's a fantastic question, Assemblymember Moore. Howard Watts for the record. This is, I won't go too into it, but this has been an issue of interest of mine for almost my entire duration in this body. Again, you've heard also other conversations about things that could impact registration fees, and I think that makes it even more of an imperative. But again, I heard from constituents the very first time I was knocking on doors that could not afford to pay their registration, didn't know what to do. And so, you know, this is something that we have been kind of talking through and trying to address for a long time, and have now just kind of arrived at this solution. So, yeah. Could you repeat your question, actually? I talked myself in a circle, lost my train of thought.
I was starting to forget my own question.
Yeah.
Are you aware if there's any other states offering?
Yes, thank you. So the reason that it's taken so long, that's where I was going. The reason this has taken so long is because there are not really other states that offer this. California has a very different system in many ways, but they have options of partnering with a third-party vendor to do online transactions, and then that third-party vendor recently worked with Affirm or one of the other installment payment plans to offer that. So it's a lot more complicated. There's extra steps involved, and that's the closest thing that I've found. I will say it's tough too because I've looked and installment fees, registration fees, when you look at just the registration component, are relatively small. But when you look at the other local, state and local taxes that are included and mandatory, together that's very high. And so I believe that we have some of the highest registration fees total in the country. And so it makes it more important for Nevada to kind of be a leader on this than others where those fees are a little bit lower.
And that was Chairman Watts for the record. Is there any more questions? Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you. This discussion just made me think of this, because when I first read the bill, this section about the installment payments, I thought that you might be talking about something similar to, your car loan. It could go onto that, kind of like our property tax goes onto our mortgage. Have you considered anything like that? I know not everyone has a car payment, but most people do.
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember Dickman. Howard Watts for the record. That's a great question. No, that is not something that we looked at. And again, it varies on who has a car payment and things like that. So that was looking at, and adding that in would also be challenging because, the fee changes year to year. There's a depreciation adjustment. So I think it would be kind of challenging to figure out how to incorporate that into, for example, a 60-month car loan. So we haven't looked at that, but definitely have tried to look at a few different options. And I think at the end of the day, the rise of kind of the buy now, pay later provided the best opportunity to meet this need and balance the different issues that you've heard about.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? And none appearing? Thank you very much, and please make room for. We're going to hear testimony in support, opposition, and neutral of AB 296. We ask you to keep your testimony to 2 minutes and avoid repeating testimony made by previous speakers. Instead, feel free to say ditto or something similar. Please also remember to clearly state and spell your name for the record. We'll begin with support here in Carson City.
Mr. Vice Chair, if you don't mind, Brian Reeder for the record, pulling double duty today, speaking on behalf of the Nevada Contractors Association in support of continuing the odometer reading collection program through the DMV. It's really difficult to get momentum to address the highway fund's needs. And if we don't know exactly what session we're going to be able to address what electric vehicles pay for their use of the roads, if it's 27, 29, 31, we don't know. If we have a gap in that data, we're concerned that that there will be a suggestion to go back and get more data. So we'd like to see that collection continue. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is John Sandy, John Sande. Here today on behalf of the Nevada Franchised Auto Dealers Association. Mr. McKay has allowed for me to come and speak on behalf of the association, so I'm very thrilled about that. We are here today in support of AB 296, which modernizes Nevada vehicle registration system by allowing for the use of digital license plates. For auto dealers, efficient fleet management is critical. Many dealerships maintain loaner vehicles, rental fleets, and test drive vehicles, requiring them to track, maintain, and ensure compliance for multiple vehicles at any given time. AB 296 will provide a valuable tool for dealers to streamline their operations by enabling real-time tracking, automated registration updates, and improved security features. With digital plates, dealers will be able to remotely update vehicle information, monitor fleet status, and enhance security by displaying messages such as stolen or inactive if that ever becomes necessary. These features reduce administrative burdens and help dealers ensure their fleets remain compliant with state regulations and tax laws without the need for constant manual intervention. This bill represents an important step forward towards modernizing Nevada's vehicle registration process and providing auto dealers with the tools needed to manage their fleets more efficiently and securely. We appreciate the committee's time and consideration, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Alexis Motorex, representing the Nevada Chapter Associated General Contractors. It's MOTAREX. We are here in support of AB 296, particularly the removal of the sunset for the collection of odometer readings in Section 6. As Mr. Reader just stated, this information is critical to have as we continue the ongoing conversation to find a sustainable and equitable mechanism to fund our roads and highways. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Nick Shepak, Nickshepak. I am the Nevada State Director of the Fines and Fees Justice Center. We want to thank Assemblymember Watts for bringing this piece of legislation. We're here in support of the section for installment plans. I think it's pretty clear through the conversation that things are getting fine-tuned, that implementation is going to be very important, but the need for these types of installments cannot be overstated. It is one of, if not the number one thing that we find leads people into a cycle of debt here in the state of Nevada, and it typically goes like this. An individual or a family gets their registration due at the same time they have their rent due and their electricity and their food for their kids, so they meet all their basic needs, and they think, I'll make that money quick. They start driving on that. They start driving on the suspended registration or unpaid registration. They receive a ticket for unpaid registration. They then have to enter into a payment plan, which they often have to pay for in a court to pay the traffic ticket. A single missed payment on that results in the suspension of a driver's license, at which point an individual either is left without a vehicle or chooses, once again, out of need for work, to drive again. If you get caught on the suspended driver's license, it's now a criminal penalty. It's a year suspension. We cannot tell you how many times we've heard some version of this story that stemmed from the simply, I did not have the couple $100 when my registration was due. I wasn't doing anything dangerous. I was just trying to get my kids to school, and I ended up with thousands and thousands of dollars in debt. This is a simple way to address that issue. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. Nick literally just swiped my speech. My name is Shane Piccinini, Shane Piccinini. I'm with the Food Bank of Northern Nevada. As you know, the route to food security is very complicated, and we believe that the section that allows for some flexibility in how we pay auto registrations would definitely bring our families in Nevada a little bit closer to achieving true food security. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more testimony and support here in Carson City? Down in Las Vegas, any testimony and support? Doesn't look like it, so we'll go to AVH. AVH, are there any callers on the line for testimony in support of this issue?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 296, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. We currently have no callers to testify in support.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear testimony in opposition to this bill. Is there anyone here in Carson City?
Chair, members of the committee, Jonathan Norman, JONATHAN, NORMAN, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. We're in soft opposition. We've been having conversations with Chair Watts and just looking for some of that fine tuning on Section 1, subsection 5 around the installment loan. I think with the power of state government putting a lender that can charge up to 40% on the website should come with a lot of negotiating power with that lender, capping the fees at a certain amount so the percentage rate is not high. Examining whether credit should be assessed. You could, this would open up a giant pool of millions of transactions, and so the lender should be able to maybe not even examine credit worthiness when making these loans. And we had a bill last session where there was not only, they weren't allowed to look at credit worthiness, but they were non-recourse loans. So just examining that and fleshing that out, and then also making sure that competitive bid process, if you have 6 bids, I'm sure in competitive bids, they're looking at the cost to the state and whether it works for the state. But if they're equal, looking at the cost to the consumer as maybe the deciding factor in those loans. I'm pretty confident we'll be able to work out that fine tuning with Chair Watts. Thank you so much.
Is there anybody else here in Carson City in opposition? Las Vegas, anybody in opposition? AVH, do we have any callers?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 296, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted and may begin.
Barry Johnston, Las Vegas, BERYJOHNSTON. I'm speaking to you today to expose the dystopian digital disaster this legislature is forcing upon us. Digital IDs, digital license plate, and mass surveillance. These systems are designed to store and monitor our movements, allowing the government to track our daily routines in direct violation of the Constitution. Survivor just lied to you. A few months ago, security researcher Jessup Rodriguez demonstrated a jailbreak method of digital license plates, accessing in the license plate and changing it. Earlier in this year, or last year, security researcher Sam Curry identified vulnerabilities of their web infrastructure. The flaws allowed unauthorized access administration functions, including turning on and enabling GPS so that they could track the people. We must protect everyone, especially women, from being tracked by their flawed technology. California Reviver collaborated with Assemblywoman Wilson to introduce AB 3138 to turn on all GPS tracking for all digital license plates. Proposed significant privacy concerns around advocacy groups, especially considering the prior agreement excluded such tracking features. 6 months ago, Michigan terminated the 2-year contract with a Reviver, citing the company's failure to comply with state laws and contractual obligations. This termination affected 1,700 drivers that had to switch back to metal plates. Nevadans are struggling on the road. AB 296 installment loans registration fees must be expanded to include fines. Unless those loans are zero interest, there will be nothing more than legalized theft from people already struggling. DMV should be strictly limited from cost servicing and registration and creating plates. You're creating a personal property tax.
Could you wrap it up?
Yes, sir. Stop punishing Nevadans with unnecessary fees. Stop taxing the working class while giving commercial fleets a free pass and enabling mass surveillance on our state. We can't trust any of you not to turn this into a dystopian nightmare. Please leave us alone and stop taxing us.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else on the line?
There are no additional callers in opposition.
So that brings us to the point of testimony in neutral. Welcome up to the dais, Mr. Severs.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair and committee members. Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV. We are neutral on AB 296. Appreciate the bill sponsor working with us and don't really feel strongly one way or the other on what the bill proposes. What we do feel strongly about is that the DMV's current revenue streams are not affected, which would include the DMV being fully compensated like we are now when the customer selects the payment plan option to renew their registration, and that the customers would be paying the same fees they do now on the metal license plates as they would with the digital license plates. Unfortunately, the zero impact fiscal note honeymoon is over, and it just so happens this is the chair's bill today, so great. We did submit a rather large fiscal note on this bill today that mainly covers computer programming. And as you know, the DMV is currently working out of 2 IT systems as part of our transformation. And the bill would require us to program in our old COBOL system, which is where most of the costs are derived from. The DMV also cannot make the July 1st implementation date, so we asked to be able to work with the bill sponsor on an amendment to push it out a bit. And if I may, Vice Chair, I can answer a couple of the questions. We understand the urgency of the bill and the implementation date, but we'd really like to stay out of programming in our old system cars, which is where the majority of our fiscal note comes from. If we add the language when the DMV determines sufficient resources are in place, it gives us greater flexibility. And it allows our IT people to implement it instead of hiring programmers. So we put this language in bills last session, and we have implemented all but one of those bills. And what we did is we just found places where we could put these bills into effect. And then on digital ID, we did have a bill a couple sessions ago that gave the DMV the ability to issue digital ID, but we're not there yet. We're a couple years out from that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there any more testimony here in Carson City in neutral? Anybody in Las Vegas in neutral? AVH, is there anybody on the line?
We currently have no callers to testify in neutral.
Well, thank you all very much. This concludes our hearing on our bill. Chair Watts, do you have any closing remarks? Well, thank you very much. We'll call a 1-minute recess.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. Good job running the hearing. I'll call the meeting back to order for some very important business ahead of us, and that's public comment, the last item on our agenda today. Again, if anyone would like to make public comment, we'll ask you to limit your remarks to 2 minutes. Again, the number to call to provide public comment is 669-900-6833. Then, when prompted for the meeting ID, enter 862-7151-1086 and then press pound. Would anyone like to make public comment here in Carson City or in Las Vegas? Seeing nobody coming forward at this time. AVH, do we have anyone joining us by phone?
Chair, the public phone is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you very much, members. That concludes our business for the day. Thank you for your attention and thorough vetting of the legislation proposed. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, March 13th at 1:30 p.m. We are adjourned.